Hi, this is Ron Darling with SNY TV. You know me from covering the Mets, and I hope you get a chance to listen to Mets Musings with Gary Mack. I had a great time. I hope you do too.
Mets Musings is an unofficial, independent podcast covering New York's National League Baseball team. It is not affiliated in any way with Major League Baseball or the New York Mets.
This is Len and Jeff from Baseball and Barbecue.
And the one place to go for New York Mets news,
Past week game reviews,
upcoming series previews,
interviews,
analysis,
opinion, and what's going down on the farm. It's Mets Musings with Gary Mack. So keep the faith, stay optimistic, and let's go Mets.
Mets Musings with
Gary Mack.
Now it's time for some New York Mets baseball talk. Here's Gary Mack bringing you the latest news and analysis from Mets Nation and the world of baseball on another edition of Mets Musings.
And hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Mets Musings as we try to circumnavigate and figure out what is wrong with this team. They stink. 1-5 on the last road trip. The hitting is gone kapooey. The pitching's gone kapooey. The strong point, the pitching, the starting pitching. And now they're not getting it done. Noah Syndergaard pitches a beautiful game. 1-0, complete game shutout, and then comes back and bombs. Jacob deGrom struggling. Matz is on the injured list. They signed some guy, Wilmer, somebody or other. Pitched pretty good though. Got to admit, he pitched pretty good, but still lost. The offense can't score runs all of a sudden. They can't buy a hit. 14 strikeouts. They're striking out like crazy again. What happened to going to the other field? Come on, Chili, get these guys going again. I blame the management team. I blame Mickey Callaway. I blame Dave Island. I thought Island was going to be this wunderbar, this brilliant, this pitching coach. We're not seeing it. 2 years now. Yeah, the numbers look good last year, but let's see some more this year. What have you done for me lately? That's what the deal is. And whether we like it or not, that's the way it is in this town. And they're not really coming through. And Brody Van Wagenen, the moves he's made have all looked like bombs so far. The Cano deal looks like a bomb. Big time. Okay, Diaz has been okay, but still. Familia, he stinks. Terrible deal. Terrible signing. Waste of money. Jed Lowry hasn't played an inning yet. Hasn't even had an at-bat. Though he's due to come Friday and play. Hopefully. Who else? Broxton. He weighs more than he's hitting. Everything seems to be... They decide to sign Darno. Why? They would have been better off taking that money signing Mesoraco. Why sign Darno, offer him a contract? Everybody was shocked when they did that. Ridiculous. Now they let him go. Now he's a Dodger. We're in the Dodgers farm system. I don't know what. But he signed with the Dodgers. Just everything, one after the other now. I mean, last year at least we got to May and June before they stunk. This year they're doing it early. Maybe that's a good sign. Maybe they'll get better then. Maybe they'll figure it out, the kinks, especially the pitching. Pitching's been horrible, starting pitching. That's their strong point. And the offense. The offense was off to a flying start. It's been horrible. Just horrible on this road trip. I don't know. I could go on and on and on, but I got a scratchy throat. I'm not going to do that. I've got to read you an email in a bit, but let's go to a voicemail that we got from my former co-host Barry, and he's going to sum it up a little bit for you. And then we got another email that's going to sum up some things and sum up some of the frustration of Met fans at this point. So, pardon me. Barry, take it away.
Gary, it's Barry. It's been a while, actually, since I co-hosted with you, and when we interviewed Ken Davidoff, since I made any contributions to Mets Musings. Though it's still early, it is beginning to look and feel like, as Yogi said, deja vu all over again. Another good start, followed by a now fairly lengthy stretch of bad baseball. The signs right now point to the Mets being and also ran in the National League once again, even though the names on the back of the uniform, in my opinion anyway, should make them at least an 85-win type team and on the cusp of the playoffs. But only until recently, the starting pitching was awful, and maybe it's time for Thor to leave the premises and be replaced by a motivated and dedicated to pitching only Noah Syndergaard. The bullpen, except for Diaz and I guess Lugo, is still awful, as is the defense. And the hitting, so good to start the season, is now all messed up. No more working pitchers into deep counts and way, way too many strikeouts. And I know it has to do with options and salaries, but why in the name of Lucas Duda or Ike Davis was Dom Smith sent down while Keon Broxton remains on the active roster? This reinforces my original thought from last time of how nice a fit Marwin Gonzalez would have been on this team instead of Jed Lowry as a free agent signing. I won't get into the Gio Gonzalez not being signed issue because it's possible he wanted to go back to the Brewers. Since he played for them last year, they just missed going to the World Series, and maybe he thought he'd have a better chance to win going there. And right now, can you blame him? Despite the emergence of Pete Alonso and Jeff McNeil, it takes time to recover from a barren farm system, which is mostly the fault of your boy Scrappy Sandy. But it is hard to see, even though managers are just middle management types in these analytic-driven days, Mickey taking this team to the playoffs. There are just way too many are-you-kidding-me type moves he makes during the game. He does not appear to be able to lead anybody, and though it's probably too soon to consider firing him, in my opinion, and again, as Yogi said, it is getting late early for Callaway. You can't fire 25 players. Before signing off, hopefully the Crane and Ron Darling, Mets icons from the past, will make a full recovery. And as hard as this normal, at least when it comes to Mets pessimists, is, I will continue to try to keep the faith, stay optimistic, and let's go Mets.
And thanks, Barry, for checking in and giving us your opinion. And before we go on, yeah, he brought up a good point that I forgot in my opening, and that is Ed Kranepool had his surgery to the kidney transplant surgery, and no word yet how that all went. I believe they're going to have a press conference on Friday, so maybe we'll learn more about that. And Ron Darling announced that the mass that was removed from his chest was cancer. He is suffering from thyroid cancer, but the doctors believe that it is treatable, and hopefully they got it early. And our thoughts and prayers are with both of you, Mets. And as you know, I've met both of them, and they are very nice guys. Ron Darling was on this show, and all the best to both, and hopefully we're all hoping for a very quick recovery, and hope to see Ed Kranepool around town again, and of course see Ronnie Darling in the booth, calling to make games very, very soon. And as far as Barry goes, he's right. Is it too early to fire Callaway? I probably so. But I got to tell you, he's got to be on a short leash. Got to be on a real short leash. And if they don't turn it around soon, he's got to go. It's the way it happens, the way it's got to go. Or if the pitching don't get straightened out, maybe it's time to get rid of the island. I thought 3 years ago, that the guy that should have got the job would have been Frankie Viola. He knew these guys. He had these guys in the minors. He should have been the guy that made the leap up here and be the pitching coach. But they decided to go with Dave Island and Mickey Callaway. And Or maybe what they should have done is went with Callaway as the pitching coach and hired a manager, a real manager that knew what they were doing, and not a first-year guy who really didn't have any experience on the bench at all. But they kind of set him up to failure, though, too, if you will. Scrappy Sandy did, because he brought him in and brought in Gary DiRacina, an American League bench coach last year. I know he's got Riggleman this year, and he's got a National League guy, but, the die was set. So they didn't help him out either last year, and it just, I don't know how much he learned or what he didn't learn, but just a lot of shake your heads and wondering what are you thinking. And it's a struggle right now. It's tough being a fan. It's tough being optimistic about this team. We will continue to try to do so, but just very difficult. But I want to read an email that I got also about this whole situation from our good friend Jeff and of Baseball and Barbecue. And he's checking in, and he says, "Hi, Gary. What is with this Jekyll and Hyde club? It is like deja vu all over again. They changed manager, changed general manager, changed coaches, changed medical staff. The more things change, the more things remain the same, especially the owners. Injuries to the pitching staff. Matz and Vargas, who started to pitch better, even though Vargas can only go no more than 5 innings. When the pitchers are pitching well, the bats go cold. When the bats are going well, like they were early in the season, the pitchers couldn't get out of their own way. What is with this team? They are 4-10 the last 14 games. The Mets are just lucky that no other team is playing that well either. A lot of the losses of the 1 or 2 run variety. Edwin Diaz giving up home runs in a tie game. Geez, if he doesn't have a lead, he loses focus or what? One of those home runs was in a 0-0 game. Look, the Mets need to score to win. Can't really blame him for the loss because the team doesn't score. Well, you know the rest. The worst loss of the stretch had to be the 18-inning affair in Milwaukee. Now, the Brewers do have a good team, and when Alonso hit that home run in the 9th to tie the game, you'd figured you'd have a decent chance to take a game from them. The game went long, and because both offenses took the next 8 innings off, the pen was taxed. Finally, the Mets broke through in the 18th with a single by McNeil, who at this point is the Mets representative on the All-Star team. Had to bring in Flexen, who promptly walks the park with a little help by umpire Angel Hernandez, who started to squeeze the plate. What a terrible loss. And to defend Chris Flexen, he did get squeezed. I mean, there were calls there. I think he had 2 strikeouts that turned out to be bases on balls, and he walked the ballpark. And I really feel bad for the kid because he was in a tough spot with a bad umpire and did not get any help at all. So didn't Bob Murphy, back to the email, didn't Bob Murphy say, "Oh, those bases on balls"? You just knew that the leadoff batter who would score. Happens all the time. Go to San Diego, where Jake reverts back to 2018 form. Pitches well, no run support. Noah Syndergaard, who needs to drop the Thor moniker and pitch better, and that's the second time we've heard that. It's become very hittable. You'd think he turned a corner with that performance against the Reds, but to pitch that poorly in San Diego, just terrible. Throwing hard isn't special anymore. Batters can hit 95-plus pitches. Alonso hits the big home run when most of us was asleep, and here comes our lockdown closer who gives us all agita before getting the final out. A grounder to Rosario, no less, and that's an adventure, too. And yesterday with Wilmer Font pitching, who pitched okay since we weren't expecting much, but another 1-run loss. How come when the Mets acquire high-profile second baseman, they forget how to hit in the Mets uniform? Alomar, Baega, Samuel, and now Cano. Of course, the Mets had a second baseman who they traded away, who went on to have a pretty good career in Jeff Kent. Okay, I went off on a tangent, but that happens when I get on a rant. We know, Jeff. We all get on rants and lose our way sometimes. But you bring up a good point with the second baseman. They had another second baseman who looked like he could handle the bat, and that was Jeff McNeil. He could have played second. He could have handled it this year. They could have went out and got an outfielder better than Keelan Broxton. And, and still, and had McNeil in there every day. They didn't need to get this. They could have groomed Kellenick for that left field job. They could have had Justin Dunn. They could have groomed for either the bullpen or the starting pitching. I don't like trading farm systems away for aging veterans. Yes, I know they got Diaz. Yeah, okay. But you know what? They could have gotten Kimbrel. They could have signed Kimbrel. They could have signed Gio Gonzalez. They could have signed Dallas Keuchel. I mean, they could have made other moves rather than mortgaging the future. You could have got Kimbrel and got a closer. Done deal. Money. You still got Kellenick. You still got Dunn. All right, let's get back to Jeff Cohen. Jeff continues. I don't blame Mickey Callaway since he can't pitch or hit for the players, but there is a New York manager about 30 miles east of Citi Field who could motivate this team and knows some of his players since they played for him, Matz, DeGrom, Syndergaard, Rosario. And he would love to manage the Mets. Hey, Brody, give him a call. Thanks for letting me vent. It's a good thing that the Marlins are up next, or is it? And that's a good point. Thanks, Jeff, so much for your email, as always. Geez, I don't know. Bringing Wally Backman in, I don't think they're going to do it. I don't think they like him. I don't think the Wilpons like him. I think they're afraid of him. I think they're afraid he'll do something. He's not their cup of tea when it comes to behavioral type of guy, and I don't think they're going to bring him in, but it's a good point. He is close. He would love to come to the major league still, even though he is managing the Long Island Ducks now in the Atlantic League. I don't know. I just don't know at this point. I do know that I've gone on and rambled, and it's time for a break because we got a great guest on. I hate to put him on so late in the show, but it was pre-recorded, and so let's take a break and be back after this.
Hey, baseball fans and book fans as well. This is Frank Nappi, author of the Legend of Mickey Tussler series, inviting all of you to learn more about my protagonist, Mickey Tussler, an incredible pitching prodigy who has autism. Follow Mickey's journey as he captures the hearts of fans everywhere with his blazing fastball and indomitable spirit. Please visit Amazon or www.franknappy.com for more information.
Hi, this is the world-famous Mr. Brewtown of BrewtownSports.podomatic.com. You know, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+. Brewtown Sports. You can also listen to the show at Stitcher.com, TuneIn.com, and iTunes.com. And we've got the new one. It's called BrewtownRadio.weebly.com. But the one that I'm most proud of being on is BaseballPodcast.net. It is the home of great baseball talk shows. Check it out, my show and all kinds of other programs all about Major League Baseball. So check it out. That's baseballpodcast.net, the home for great baseball talk shows.
516-619-6341. That is the comment voicemail hotline if you'd like to be a part of the show, and drop us a line, leave us a comment or a voicemail, question, anything at all. Call that number 516-619-6341, or go to MetsMusings.com and click on that widget in the middle of the screen, and that's a speak pipe, and you can leave a voicemail right through your computer through your computer's microphone. Or if you prefer to do things the old-fashioned way, send us an email at metsmusings@gmail.com. The Facebook page is facebook.com/groups/MetsMusings, and the Twitter handle is at MetsMusings1. And if you'd like to help out the show, check out our Patreon page. Check out the campaign at patreon.com/MetsMusings. And joining me this week is Wayne Coffey, and Wayne is the author of a terrific book called They Said It Couldn't Be Done. You know, we've been concentrating a lot on the 69 Mets 50th anniversary, and we're lucky enough to have gotten Wayne on the show. And Wayne, welcome to Mets Musings.
Gary, it's a pleasure to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Wayne, this is a terrific book, and it brings back a lot of memories. We were talking before here about I was 16 when the Mets won. You were 15 and running on the field. But, you know, for us old guys and Met fans, what do you think is so special about this team? I guess because it's the first championship, but it seems to go beyond that with these guys.
Well, I think it really does go beyond that, Gary, and I think it has everything to do with what the Mets had been for their entire existence prior to 1969. I mean, Met fans of our age and older, and some who are younger, know the whole unseemly story. But 1962, right out of the box, the Mets are born. National League Baseball returns to New York City, and the Mets go 40-120, and it takes some doing to go 40-120. You know, they lose their first 9 games right out of the box, and I mean, the year was just brutal. And then and the losing continued, and it continued for pretty much 7 years. And in fact, in that, I tallied it up, and in those 7 years, heading into 1969, the Mets lost 737 games.
Wow.
That's a lot of losing. And so I really think it just made what happened in 1969 just such an incredibly charming and wholly unexpected event. And you know, there was nothing not to love about this team. I think that's another part of it too. They were so likable. They were the underdog's underdog. You know, I mean, right. I was telling someone earlier they were someone who wasn't a baseball fan. They said, describe the '69 Mets to me, and I said they were the baseball equivalent of the little engine that could. And you know, and that's really what they were. And so I think that's really why it just resonated so profoundly with people.
And I think that summer too was such a historical, if you will, summer that man walked on the moon, and then if you want to take it from the history point, you know, man walked on the moon. From the music history, you had Woodstock, and here from the sports world, you had this magnificent event where the lovable losers, as you say, who, by the way, invented ways of losing in '62 that you wouldn't even deem possible. They found a way.
Did they ever? In fact, one of my favorite little nuggets from '62 that I came across, Gary, was early on. I mean, the Mets were eliminated from contention before Memorial Day. I mean, it was brutal. But so the Mets are on the road early on in the year. And who knows what the record is, but it's really bad. And Casey Stengel has the traveling secretary, Lou Nis, circulate the day's agenda, what time, when they need to be at the ballpark, and when they're getting dressed, when BP is, and the day's itinerary. And on that note, Stengel writes, there will be 2 buses leaving the hotel for the ballpark. There will be a bus at 2 o'clock for those who need extra work, and there will be an empty bus at 5 o'clock.
And that was Casey.
That was Casey. And he wasn't used to, with his pedigree, he was not used to all this losing. So
I almost wonder, though, if he had to expect something. I mean, he had been out of the game a couple of years. he was up there in age. He knew that he was going to be, for lack of a better term, the face of the franchise. He had to know it wasn't going to be good.
He did have to know, and you know how it goes with the expansion clubs. You sort of get the players everyone doesn't want, and they had some beloved old favorites like Gil Hodges on the team, and some legitimate players. Frank Thomas, a slugger who had 34 homers that year, but they also had Marv Throneberry, and it was a wild year for sure. But you know what? I think people in so many ways, Gary, were so happy to have baseball back. It almost didn't even matter. And I interviewed a bunch of old Dodger fans, and I'm not quite old enough to have gone to Ebbets, and I didn't really get that fully until I talked to them, and I talked to just about the depth of their heartbreak when the Dodgers left for L.A. And, that never went away. And I still think even all these decades later, it's still the Mets were born out of that heartache. And, I think that's why they were so beloved, even if they lost all those games. It's when you go back to '69, Gary, the one thing that was striking me as I was doing the research was just how much of a phenomenon the New York Mets became that year. They drew almost 2.2 million fans, and that was about 400,000 more than any other team in baseball. It was more than double what the Yankees drew, the fabled New York Yankees.
Right.
So, this was Howie Rose described it to me as, every night that summer at Shea Stadium was Woodstock.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It certainly was. It was an event anytime you went to the game, and it was just, and that place was rocking. And how Shea Stadium, that place could rock when you went there.
It absolutely could. And not only did they win 100 games when no one. Remember, in spring training, the writers asked Gil Hodges, "What's your prediction?" The Mets had never been anywhere near 500. Their high water mark was 73 wins in '68, and that's when it really started to change with the arrival of Gil Hodges. But so '69, the writers asked Hodges his prediction, and he says 85 games, and they almost laughed in his face. 85 games, and it turned out Gil Hodges was in fact completely wrong because they won 100.
That's right. And speaking of Gil Hodges, this is a man that came in '62, as you say, was an original Met. Came back to manage in '68, put this team together, and to this day, I still think he is probably so well respected, and it's an interesting thing to see a 72 or 73-year-old man actually brought to tears when he talks about Gil Hodges. I know Tom Seaver is treated him like, always felt he was like a second father to him. What was it about Gil Hodges that brought this team together so much, and that the respect is still there today?
It is still there today, and it was just so on a of course foremost on a human level, and for his family. It was such a unspeakable loss when he passed at the age of 47 on Easter Sunday, 1972. It was just I remember that so vividly. But Gil Hodges brought to me and I should just tell you, Gary, that every single player on that team who I've talked to said without Gil Hodges that championship never happens. 100% unanimous. And what he did was there was this, people will remember, this was a former Marine from Princeton, Indiana, who had this just, apart from his physical strength and stature and presence, really, with a capital P, there was this, kind of Midwestern authenticity about him, this trust. You just felt like this was a man a man's man, a guy you could completely trust. You could who would always have your back. And I really think that his genius that year, and he was a great baseball man and did all kinds of tremendous things in the game management front. But I think his greatest achievement was with all his platooning and all the role players they had on that team, Al Weiss's, the Duffy Dyers, J.C. Martins, Rod Gasper, those kind of guys. He got everyone to buy in. He made everybody feel valued without it seeming like just a bunch of BS. I remember talking to Al Weiss about this, and he just said, my whole career, they pinch hit for me. People told me, you can't do this, you can't do that. And Gil Hodges had a way of just instilling belief in guys and putting them in situations where they could come through. And, it's easy to talk. You could go to a leadership seminar and people will talk about motivating people and how to rally the troops, but it's a lot easier to say than to do. And to me, Gil Hodges, when he arrived in '68, Gary, he did the hardest thing there is to do for any kind of leader, whether it's at a ball club or a business or a classroom, whatever it is. He changed the entire culture of the organization. He changed the Mets' DNA and basically said this lovable loser stuff is over. Right. We're done with that.
Right. And like you said, he was just so well respected by everybody. Shamsky talked about disagreeing with him, and Kranepool always there was stories for years that Kranepool and him didn't get along. But what Kranepool explains is that he respected the man. He just didn't agree with his decision to bench him. And you can understand that, but a deep respect and love for the man, and just an amazing thing. And why he's not in the Hall of Fame is beyond me, but maybe there's still a chance. Maybe hopefully one day he'll get in there.
Yeah, if anything, and I spent a lot of my time and energy in the book. There may be more about Gil Hodges in this book than anybody else on the team. And the more people that I talked to and the stories that I heard about his deep goodness and his kindness and his humility. This is a guy who won the Bronze Star in serving in Okinawa in World War II and never talked about it, almost refused to talk about it, just didn't want to. I served my country. That's what you're supposed to do. He didn't want any credit. He didn't, he was the antithesis of what we have today, these kind of strutting, self-promoting people who, want to draw attention to themselves at every turn. Gil Hodges was the polar opposite. In fact, his old Dodger teammate, Carl Erskine, said he was the only guy, and I mean the only guy, who was never, ever booed, not one time at Ebbets Field. He could strike out 4 times. He could go 1 for 20 or 21, whatever it was in that 1952 World Series when, as Gil said, a couple hits by me might have changed the outcome. But right. Even that, they never booed him.
In fact, they were praying for him in the churches on a Sunday.
Oh, that's a classic story with the priest in the local parish. And it was a really brutally hot day in early May, and the people are in there, and it's just absolutely sweltering. And the priest says, "It's too hot for a sermon. Keep the commandments and go home and pray for Gil Hodges." Who? It's got to be the only ball player whose name was ever invoked in a sermon that way. So,
my guest is Wayne Coffey, and the book is "They Said It Couldn't Be Done." It's a great book about the '69 Mets, New York City, and the most astounding season in baseball history. And Wayne, the book has been out about a month now, and doing very well. And you also have an audio version of the book out, and you were very fortunate to get Gary Cohen to do the audio on the book.
Gary, I interviewed Gary for the book, Gary, and he was a great source for the book. He was 11 years old, 11-year-old Queens kid, and so he had very, vivid recall of 1969. In fact, he told me a great story about how when he found out Met tickets were going on sale, he talked to his mother, and who was also a big Met fan, and he said, we have to get tickets. I have to go to a playoff game. The Mets have never had a playoff game, and I have to go. I have to be there. And she said, yeah, I agree. We've got to get them. And Gary found out when they were going to go on sale at 6 a.m. the next morning. And Gary talked to his mother. She signed off on it. He went to bed at 8:30 or 9 o'clock or whatever it was, set his alarm for midnight, and with his mother's blessings, Gary Cohen, by himself, leaves his apartment in Parkway Village, goes and gets on the Q44 bus, takes it to the E train, takes it to the 7 train, gets off at Shea Stadium, Willets Point, and waits outside Shea Stadium all night until the ticket booths open at 6 a.m. at 11 years old by himself.
It was a different world.
I love it. But so Gary was a treasure trove of memories that he had, and I sent him an early copy of the book, and he loved it. And he told me that he considered it a masterpiece, and I was just blown away and humbled by his reaction. And then I just said, you know what? I'm just going to ask him a question, and we'll see what happens. And I said, Gary, would you consider narrating the audio book of They Said It Couldn't Be Done? And he said, I would be honored. And he read basically had to go. It's not an easy job. 95,000 words. You're basically semi-locked in a soundproof booth for 3 or 4 days, 3 or 4 hours at a shot. And he does a masterful job. And he is Gary's iconic voice is telling the story of the '69 Mets, and it's really it's a treasure to me. And I get goosebumps just listening to him read the story.
And, of course, he's got, besides being a fan, he's got that connection back to Bob Murphy, who was there for all of those, and Ralph Kiner.
Yep, that's right. I mean, the Mets, they've just been blessed with so many great announcers. And just I get into anything and everything in the book. You know, I focus, of course, on the players and their journeys and how they got there, how they got to this point in time in their baseball lives. But I also talked to the daughter of the sign man, Carl Earhart, and Jane. I do a lot on Jane Jarvis, the organist, and I even found the guys who were 4 kids from Canarsie, who were basically, for want of a better term, the inventors of the "Let's Go Mets" chant. I mean, they told me they were all Dodger fans. To go back to that, they were Dodger fans who had their hearts ripped out. And when the Dodgers came back to New York for the first time, except this time their shirts said Los Angeles. It was Memorial Day weekend, 1962, Dodgers' first visit, and they were not going to miss this. And one of the kids grabbed a bed sheet from the linen closet. They got a can of green spray paint, and he just figured, well, I don't know, what are we going to write on here? And he just started, hey, I don't know, how about "Let's Go Mets"? So he wrote "Let's Go Mets" on it. And they go to the game. Sandy Koufax is pitching for the Dodgers. After 3 innings, the Dodgers are up 10-0, which is pretty much how it went in '62. So they're down 10-0, and then they stand up in the upper deck of the Polo Grounds with their banner, and they start saying, "Let's go Mets, let's go Mets." and people start picking up on it. And no one could believe that the fans are chanting "Let's go Mets" in a game when they're down 10-0. But here we are 57 years later, and they're still chanting it.
That's right. It's too bad he couldn't get royalties on that. You know?
Oh, I know. Yeah, I mean, today they'd probably have, there'd be copyrights and all kinds of stuff.
Now,
they might have a famous podcast. Who knows?
Right. Now, you did a lot of research for this book, and tell us a little bit about that. I mean, you interviewed, I guess, practically everybody that's still alive from that team. What was the research like, and did you find out anything you didn't know. I know there was a couple of stories in there that I was astounded about. The Don Clendenin and Martin Luther King connection. But anything that surprised you at all as you were doing your research?
Oh, the surprises really almost were nonstop, and to me that was the most fascinating part of the journey. I probably spent 2.5 years or so on this book, traveled about 20,000 miles. I didn't get everybody because some guys just didn't really want to talk. I mean, it happens, I guess, and but you know, you do the best you can, and for example, Tommy Agee wasn't around. He died almost 20 years ago at a young age, and but I went to Whistler, Alabama, where Tommy was from, and talked to Joe Agee, his brother, and Joe showed me around, and while I was there, I went to the community nearby where Cleon Jones was born, raised, and still lives, and that part of it was just fascinating too. I mean, I found out, and I had no idea, Gary, but Cleon Jones, his hometown is a place where the locals know as Africa Town, and it's called that because it was the place where the last slave ship ever to come to the United States in 1860 dropped its cargo. Human beings from West Africa who they stole, threw into this boat, and brought them over here to be slaves. And there are a lot of people in that town to this day who can trace their ancestry to that slave ship.
Wow.
In fact, there's a cemetery in Africa Town, and in the cemetery, all of the graves face east because that's the direction of Africa. And, you know, this is where Cleon Jones is from. And Cleon Jones is actually not just a beloved figure in the community, but he's very much a leader, and he's trying to raise funds and build a museum to honor the history of Africa Town. And it's a poor place. It's desperately poor in a lot of ways, and you know there are a lot of struggles. But Cleon Jones can't imagine being anywhere else, and to be with him in his own environment and to see it was a remarkable experience. And again, that was the part of this whole process that I think that I enjoyed the most, just going around and visiting with these guys in their own environments and hearing their stories about how their lives brought them to Shea Stadium in 1969.
And quite an amazing group of guys and stories. The Jerry Koosman story, how he gets in, gets signed by the Mets. Of course, we all know the Tom Seaver with the illegal move by the Atlanta Braves and signing him, and just there's a whole host of stuff, and it's all in the book. I don't want to give away everything because I want people to go buy the book, but it is lots of great tales in there. And one person that we never seem to discuss a lot, and you don't see books written a lot, but Joan Payson really, I'm not sure if the fans even know about her today. We know about the Wilpons and how much they are not liked, let's say. But Joan Payson was really the original owner of the Mets and was very beloved by everybody.
Oh, completely. She was a woman who, first of all, she was very much a groundbreaking individual in her own right. She was the first woman to buy a professional sports team with her own funds, and she traced her roots to actually all the way back to the Mayflower. And so this was old money, and and she was a noted philanthropist, a patron of the arts, and just loved baseball. In fact, when she bought the Mets, she had a small piece of the former New York Giants, and then still the San Francisco Giants, and had to divest herself of that when she bought the Mets. But she was beloved and by all accounts a really kindly, big-hearted woman who really just treated the players almost as if they were her sons. And I think you're right; it is an overlooked part of the story. And there are so many. It's one of the unsung heroes on this team was Ron Taylor from Toronto, Canada, the relief pitcher. And Ron Taylor was a guy. He may have been as smart as anyone in baseball. He was an electrical engineer, for one, and then after his playing days were over, in fact, it was after 1969, he took a trip, a kind of a goodwill trip, rally the troops trip to Vietnam, and he was so moved by the suffering that he saw, the loss, the carnage, the war. It's unspeakable, and he was so moved by that suffering, he decided then and there that he was going to be a doctor, and he was going to be in the business of healing and making people feel better. And he starts medical school. In fact, he told me a funny story. He starts medical school at age 35 after his career is over, and he was a darn good relief pitcher who really never got the credit that he deserved. But he goes in and he has takes the boards and does wonderfully on them, and just a brilliant guy. And he's being interviewed in medical school, and the guy's like looking at his career, and he sees this like 10-year gap in his education, and he just said, "Well, what have you been doing?" And he said, "Well, I've been a major league pitcher." And he said, "Well, we don't get many people here who's like 35 years old who want to start med school." And he said, "Well, you have one now." And he got admitted, and then he became, baseball fans may know, but became the team doctor for the Toronto Blue Jays for years and years.
Yeah.
And just Joe McDonald, who is the only surviving member of the front office, now 90 years old, told me that he said they don't give awards for guts, but if they did, Ron Taylor would have been at the head of the line. He took the ball every time, never made excuses, pitched in the 64 series for the Cardinals against the Yankees, and then pitched and was very effective for the Mets in 1969. Mm-hmm. And never gave up his career. I remember when I went to see him in Toronto, I said, you have a record that'll never be broken. Do you know that? And he said, "No, I wasn't aware of that." And I said, "You have a career World Series ERA of 0.
Wow.
And no one will ever break that." And he said, "Wow, that's pretty good." He's a lovely man. Yeah. He's now in his probably 82 or 83. Right. Just a real sweet guy.
Yeah, he was one of the older members of that team. Was Ron Taylor.
Yep.
A lot of them were young in their mid to early 20s, but he was one of the oldest ones.
Yep.
I don't know if you got to talk to Bud Harrelson at all, because we all know Bud is suffering from Alzheimer's disease now. Were you able to interview him at all?
No, I was. I actually tried to reach him through his wife and one of his sons, and it just never never really happened. And the same with Tom Seaver. Mm-hmm. I had interviewed Tom earlier in my sports writing career. I was with the Daily News for 30 years. Mm-hmm. I had talked to him, but I didn't have an especially close relationship with him at all. And I tried to reach Tom through the Mets and then through the Baseball Hall of Fame. And Nancy, his wife, just was, it just wasn't something that she was comfortable with, and I totally understood that and respected that. So, but no, I didn't get a chance. I would have loved to have seen and talked to Bud, because his glove especially was another one of the real key ingredients on that team. One of the interesting things when you go back and study the stats of the '69 Mets, Gary, their offense, their attack was really marginally better than the '62 Mets. Mm-hmm. They were at the bottom of the league in almost every offensive category. They didn't have a 30 home run guy. They didn't have a 100 RBI guy. They didn't even have an 80 RBI guy. The team batting average was 242. On base percentage was, I think, 11th out of a 12-team league. It wasn't good, but boy, they could pitch and they could field.
Yeah.
And Bud Harrelson was a huge part of that. And baseball people talk about strength up the middle, and boy, the Mets certainly had it with Grote, Harrelson, and Tommy Agee.
All right. And when Weiss was in there, Weiss was a good fielder as well and playing second when Boswell sat, and Boswell had more the bat than the glove, or was known for more the bat than the glove, but played a pretty decent second base.
Yep. No, that's right. And Weiss was a great glove man, and he could play he'd play short when this was a time when guys were coming and going, doing their 2 weeks of military duty. So when Harrelson was gone, either Weiss or I guess Bobby File sometimes would play short, and then they'd just keep moving around. But they had a lot of guys who could catch it. That's for sure.
And that's something that's foreign to fans today. The military duty. It was. We all knew about it back then, and as you said, Harrelson would have to go for 2 weeks, and a couple of the other guys, and Nolan Ryan had a thing too, if I recall.
Yes, he did. He was gone in between that, and he had some kind of niggling injuries all year, so he was kind of in and out the whole year. So this is why. This was as much a team effort, a true team effort, as any World Series run that it has ever been. And the other thing that's sometimes lost in sort of in the euphoria at the end of the season, Gary, is that for all the great things the Mets did this year and the crazy games that they won in 1969, on August 13th, right before Woodstock was starting, they had kind of stumbled out of the All-Star break, and the Mets were 10 games out of first place, and had slipped to third. The Cardinals had moved ahead of them. The Cubs were just crushing everyone and looked like they were about to run away with it. And from that point on, when the Mets were 10 games out, they went 38-11 to finish the year. And they did that with these just astonishing contributions from in August and September. Guys like that you don't hear nearly enough about: Jim McAndrew, Don Cardwell, Gary Gentry. These guys were they were lights out pitching, and the Mets just went on this roll and never stopped. They went 38. They go 38-11, and then they win 7 of 8 games in the postseason.
Yeah. And I think we missed that fact that they weren't good that whole year. They were good for the Mets, but at the end is when they really turned it on. And as you say, everybody contributed that. I mean, I can remember. Well, even in the postseason, Nolan Ryan against the Braves coming in. And, of course...
Yeah, don't you love it when people talk about how daring it is, like when a guy gets a 4-out save?
Yeah.
And, well, in the Game 3 against the Braves, Nolan Ryan came in with nobody out in the third. Nolan Ryan had a 7-inning save.
Yeah.
That's 21 outs. That's a pretty good outing. That was the other thing about this team. Kuzman and Seaver, they won 18 of 19 down the stretch, and almost all of them were complete games. which baseball fans of your age and my age will. We remember what complete games were,
right.
But the Mets had 51 of them in 1969. Wow. 51 complete games as a team. And last year, Noah Syndergaard led the Mets with 2.
2. I was going to say.
Yeah, he had one yesterday, so God bless him. But the game's changed a little bit.
I'm not even sure they had 51 in the whole National League or Major League Baseball last year.
No, actually, I looked. Last year in Major League Baseball total, there were not 51 complete games.
It's incredible, isn't it? How much that's changed, and yet there's more injuries today, more arm injuries, I think, today than ever, or we just know about it more. Maybe that's part of the reason too. But
well, I think this is another discussion, but I just think, and I know a lot of old school pitching people will think that they have it all wrong today, that they baby the guys too much, and I don't know, and I'm not a doctor, and I don't know enough about I know there have been a million studies done, but I will tell you that it sure seemed as if there were a lot fewer arm injuries, and there was a game, talk about, pitchers and their durability that year, and this typified what those Mets were all about. Juan Marichal is pitching against the Mets. They always had a brutal time against him, as most teams did, but he shuts out the Mets for 9 innings, and the Mets being the Mets, they were also shut out, so it's 0-0 after 9. Goes to the 10th, Marichal comes out, scoreless 10th. Goes to the 11th, Marichal comes out, scoreless 11th. 12th, Marichal, scoreless 12th. 13th inning, same thing. Marichal comes out for the 14th inning. It's still 0-0. He gets the first 2 outs, and then Tommy Agee hits a home run. And the Mets win 1-0. That was Marichal's 151st pitch of the game.
Oh, my goodness.
Pitching coach would go to jail if he did that now.
Yeah. And they talk about Santana with the 127 and the no-hit. It ruined his career. But and Marichal also pitched in that famous game against Warren Spahn, wasn't it? They both went 10 or 12 innings or something.
Yeah, there was another. Yeah. There.
So
a lot of pitchers would do that. The Mets. This is just astonishing to think about now. But the Mets' best relief pitcher in '69, Tug McGraw, never got in the World Series.
Yeah, I was surprised when I read that.
Never pitched in the World Series.
And Jim McAndrew didn't throw a pitch either.
No, he didn't. Yeah. Nope, Jack DeLauro didn't throw a pitch. Wow. There were, but there were, so Marichal, there was just one crazy game. There was the game against the Cardinals where Steve Carlton set the all-time strikeout record at the time, 19 strikeouts, and loses 4-3 to the Mets because Ron Swoboda hit 2 two-run homers.
And I think he struck out the other 2 times, right?
He did strike out, and after the game, Swoboda, he's. You got to love the guy. He was funny and smart, and it was like he took truth serum, and he just said, "Well, he got me twice, I got him twice."
And then, of course, the other was it a doubleheader? I think with Cardwell and Koosman, both drove in the winning runs, and when both games they won 1-0, I believe.
That's right, in September in Forbes Field, and it was. According to Elias Sports Bureau, it was the only time that has ever happened in baseball history. 2 1-0 games where the winning run was driven in by the pitchers. And I talked to Phil Regan of the Cubs, and who's now a minor league pitching instructor for the Mets, by the way, at age 82.
Yeah.
And he's a great guy and has an insanely good memory. And Phil was the star relief pitcher for the Cubs, and now they're imploding in September. And he told me he remembered looking at the scoreboard and seeing 1-0, and finding out that the pitchers drove in the runs, and that's when he just kind of shook his head and he said, "This is crazy stuff. What is going on?" Like it's. And it just, the games, the wacky games just went on all year long. It was,
Well, we know that the Mets won it. I mean, they put it together, but the collapse by the Cubs is something that was something to see as well. And of course, the belief is that one of the problems was that they played day games at the time. Yes, folks, the young people out there, they didn't have lights at Wrigley Field until. What was it, 1990 something or other? The date escapes me now. So they played all their games at daytime, and DeRocha had a short pitching staff, and really they think drove those players into the ground, and that's one of the reasons that their collapse was imminent. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, that's what Phil Regan thinks, absolutely, for sure. And he just said by September we were just completely gassed. And when you look at it, you look at the Cubs stats. It's Ernie Banks, the great Ernie Banks, Hall of Fame first baseman, was 38 years old in 1969. He played 158 games.
Wow.
Randy Hundley, the catcher, played 151. He would never use anybody else but Phil Regan in the bullpen. In fact, with a couple of the other relievers, Don Notabart was one of them, and there were a couple other guys who would get up and throw on their own. They said they'd never get into a game, but they would get up and throw on their own just so their names would get mentioned in the press box. But yeah, I mean the Cubs. I think they went 8. They finished the year 8-18, I think, over their last 26 games. So it was pretty much a free fall.
And it didn't hurt. It didn't help them having somebody breathing down their necks either. I guess that pressure, and Leo DeRocha could be a bit of a. Well, it's a family show, so I can't really say.
Yeah, you may want to hold back there a little bit, but he was not everybody's favorite flavor.
No. Well, Wayne, we could talk all night, but I gotta let you go. And again, the name of the book is "They Said It Couldn't Be Done." It's a terrific book. Add it to your library. I know there's a lot of books coming out now on the '69 Mets. But this is one you should add as well. It's a terrific history of the event, and the young fans should get it as well, so they can learn the history of their team that they root for now. And if you don't like reading a book, get the audio book. It's written. I mean, it's voiced by Gary Cohen. What more could you ask for? So.
Yep, that's right. He's the top of the charts. So.
And Wayne, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out this evening. Any more book signings around or dates that we can possibly see you at?
Well, it's I am actually. I'm not sure when this is going up, Gary, but I am going to be at. It's a little bit out of the city, so it's a little bit of a road trip. But I'm going to be at Greenwich Public Library. Next Wednesday, May 8th, with Tyler Kepner, who is a tremendous baseball columnist for the New York Times and the author of an acclaimed new book called K, A History of Baseball in 10 Pitches. And it's a bestseller. Tyler is a really gifted writer and reporter, and so we're going to be there together. I'm actually going to be at the Baseball Hall of Fame in June. There are going to be some other events coming up, but the best thing for people to do, I have a website which is WayneCoffeyAuthor.com, and the places, the events I'm doing and where I'll be will be on there. So
okay, we'll be sure to check that out. And what's up next for you? Another book in the works, or?
Yeah, there are a couple of candidates. We're still kind of knocking them around. Nothing is firm yet, but I've pretty much always got a book going, and it's what revs the old revs the old engine, and since I'm a half a century removed from 1969. The engine needs revving,
Yeah.
so I gotta. Work keeps me young, so.
That's right. We're still very young, Wayne. Remember that.
There we go. I like the way you think.
Okay, and thanks again for coming on, and I'll be back right after this.
Looking for great Cardinals talk? Then check out Conversations with C70. My name's Daniel Shoftaw, and I talk with some of the great bloggers on the internet today about their teams. It always comes back to the Cardinals. Find the latest episode on my website, www.cardinal70.com, or at baseballpodcast.net.
Baseball and BBQ, your place for interesting baseball talk, opinions, and history.
Baseball and BBQ, your place for barbecue recipes, tips, and interviews from the world of barbecue. If you like baseball and if you like barbecue, then tune in to Baseball and BBQ. Find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and BaseballTalkRadio.com, along with Mets Musings and other great baseball podcasts.
With all the Mets news, it is the news from around the world and around the corner. Here's Gary Mack.
Okay, we're back, and boy, I still don't know what to say. I mean, it's a tough row. It's really tough. Marlins come into town. We'll see if they can turn it around against them. I don't know. I don't see it, but something's got to shake this team up, whether it's got to be a coach going or a manager going or something. I guess the most logical person to go, if anybody, if you just want to do a coach, would have to be the pitching coach, I guess. You're not going to get rid of Chili Davis. You just brought him in, and his philosophy was working. If you don't want to get rid of Callaway right away, you're not going to get rid of Riegelman because you brought him in. You need that experience there in case you decide to get rid of Callaway. So what's left? The bullpen coach? Yeah, all right. It's not going to shake the team up a lot. Dave Island is the guy, I guess, that's got to go. I don't know. Just a wild guess. We'll have to see what happens. I don't know. As I said, I got a scratchy throat. You can hear me clearing it. So I'm going to wrap this show up for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. I want to thank my guest, Wayne Coffey. He was terrific. And I want to thank you all for listening. And don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, YouTube, wherever you listen or watch the podcast. Hit the subscribe button. That helps me grow the show and expand to new listeners. And until next time, as tough as it is, Met fans, keep the faith, stay optimistic, and let's go Mets. Take care, everybody. I'll see you next time with another edition